Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're talking Wolves Grizzlies from Saturday, a really fun game, and a game the Wolves really should have won before they fell to the Grizzlies at the end. We'll talk about what happened down the stretch of the fourth quarter, and of course, what happened on that last possession. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Monday, everybody. Today on the show, we are talking Wolves Grizzlies from Saturday. It's a bit of a post-game pod. We'll talk a little bit about tonight's game as well. But Saturday was a fun game and a lot to get to, a lot being discussed regarding how the Wolves closed the game. So I want to spend quite a bit of time here off the top on my thoughts on how the Wolves executed down the stretch, and also specifically on that final possession when Ant got we'll call it a difficult look to try and win the game. So we'll break all that down here right away off the top. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, and that includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You could also download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can watch there too. And a reminder, you can subscribe to the daily newsletter Monday through Friday, lockedondaily.com. Subscribe there. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. It's lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. All right. So the Timberwolves lost on Saturday to the Grizzlies by 2. It's a game that they were up by a point at halftime, 4 going into the fourth quarter, led by as many as, I think, 6 was their largest lead in this game. It should have been greater than that. They missed some free throws along the way, like right when they could have expanded that lead. They were up 6 in the fourth quarter with just a few minutes to play. And it really kind of felt like with call it 5 minutes to play with the Wolves up 6, 5.5 minutes to play. Randle gets a dunk off of an offensive rebound. And actually Jaden got a dunk a couple minutes later. And it was still a 6-point lead with 5 minutes to play. It felt like the Wolves were going to win this game. It just kind of had that vibe of a game like this has been back and forth all game, but things are trending in the right direction. The Wolves got a bunch of really good individual performances, not from Anthony Edwards. We'll talk about that. But for the most part, everybody else played well. And there were great Rudy moments. They were great. Jaden had an awesome game. Donte DiVincenzo had an awesome game. Julius Randle had really good moments. Naz was great off the bench. Like this felt like a very a game that was going to go the Wolves' way with 5 minutes to play, even though they were only up 6. It just had that vibe. But then Jaren Jackson Jr. checks back into the game, knocks down a 3 immediately. On the other side of the floor, Julius Randle gets blocked. And then a couple of possessions where nobody scores. Then Desmond Bane scores. I think at that point it was maybe a second bucket of the game. He had a very quiet game. He gets an and one on a tough foul from Donte DiVincenzo. I believe Donte made a mistake. Yeah, he took a tough 3 in transition, and Donte was great, but kind of an ill-advised, on the move 3 in transition, up 3 with under 4 minutes to play. He misses and then commits a foul on the other end. Desmond Bane gets an and one. And then with the game tied, the Wolves took Naz Reid out. We'll talk more about that because Naz had a great game. They put Rudy back in with just under 4 to play. And the Wolves scored a couple straight possessions. Jaden strips Desmond Bane. And then you're feeling good again. Like the Grizzlies have to call a timeout, right? Jaden makes a shot. Then he strips Desmond Bane right at the timeline. The Wolves are up 4 with 2 minutes and 40 seconds to play. The Grizzlies call timeout. And, more back and forth. They're up 4 now with a minute and a half to play. And Julius Randle gets called for a foul on Jaren Jackson Jr., which, letter of the law, he kind of, he's physical with him. That's how Julius Randle plays defense. About, 14 feet from the basket. He kind of body checks him a little bit. They call a foul. The Wolves are in the penalty. So Jaren Jackson Jr. gets a couple of free throws. On the other end, Rudy Gobert gets fouled and misses both free throws. So now you're only up 2. And off the rebound, Donte DiVincenzo forces a jump ball, but the Wolves don't, and I feel like they almost never play this right. Jim Peterson always talks about it on the Wolves broadcast. about how if you know you're at a disadvantage for the jump, you can try and just steal the tap right off the jump, but usually the refs are going to catch that. Or the better decision is to have somebody who's on the side of the jump go to where you know the other team's going to tap it. So in this case, the Grizzlies had two guys near their basket, and Brandon Clark was going to, near the Wolves basket, he was going to tip it there, obviously. But I think it was Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. Neither one of them went back there, and the Grizzlies got the possession. Ja Morant hits a tough shot. Ja didn't have a very good game either. In a game that was billed as Ja versus Ant, those guys were pretty quiet. Ja hits a tough shot to tie the game, and then Julius Randle just loses the ball on the other end. Ja hits another shot. Now the Wolves are down 2 with 18 seconds, and now we're to the final possession, which is what I want to spend the rest of this segment talking about. So the Wolves are down 2 with 18 seconds. They call a sideline out of bounds play for Anthony Edwards. There's a mishandle on the handoff. He almost mishandles the ball completely. He shoves off, like very clearly shoves off of the rookie, Jalen Wells, who did an awesome job, by the way, defensively. Just two-hand shoves him to get himself open. Officials don't call it. Ant gets a wide open look from the right slot, misses it. On the rebound, Donte, again, gets involved. He's got the ball. It looks like they're going to call another jump ball, but somebody, I think it might have been Brandon Clark on the Grizzlies, was standing out of bounds when he touched the ball. So it's Wolves ball. They call a timeout. They have to inbound it from the baseline with 6 seconds to play, 6.1 seconds to play. They call a baseline out of bounds play that they've called many times before. And the play call has Ant throwing the ball in, which a lot of times on sideline out of bounds plays, the guy who throws it in is the guy the ball comes back to. I saw some chatter on X of like people like, why would Ant throw the ball in if you want him getting the ball? A lot of times that is the case. Not always from the baseline, though. That's a little bit of a tougher, especially in this situation, that's a tougher play call, but it's pretty common to have your guy throwing the ball in, come back and get the ball. But the play call was for Rudy Gobert to set a pin down for Mike Conley to pop into the corner, and Conley gets the pass from Randle to shoot the potential game-winning three. That was the play call. Ant's inbound to Randle was a bit long, which you want to err on that side. You don't want to undershoot it or the game's over anyway. It's a bit long, and Ant decides to just abort the play call. Like, he goes rogue. He decides to run basically through where Gobert's setting the screen. Here, I've actually got it right. So, Ant decides basically to run between Gobert and the man he's supposed to be screening. Gets the ball from Randle as a handoff and shoots a really tough contested three from not quite where his, like, the hot spot is, where he's made all those tough shots, but a little bit further above the break than that, and airballs it. Not a good look. It's being defended by Brandon Clark, who switched seamlessly with Ja Morant, which was just really good on the Grizzlies' part, how they handled that. The question is, well, first of all, what about the play call? Second of all, what about Ant's decision making? Let's talk about the play call first. It's a little weird because it's not like Mike Conley was gangbusters in this game. Mike Conley played 15 minutes, which was the least of anybody not named Josh Minott that saw the floor. He was 1 for 4 shooting, 1 for 3 on threes, had 3 points at that point. So a little bit weird to call the play for Mike Conley. However, I understand not calling the play for Anthony Edwards. Ant was 0 for 5 from 3 in this game, 0 for 4 at that point, and had just missed one. Had looked, I would say, relatively disinterested for most of the fourth quarter. Had 6 turnovers in the game. This was a bad Anthony Edwards game. So using him as a decoy makes some sense. I actually don't mind the play call. I saw people trying to clown the play. I don't know what you're supposed to, that wasn't what they were supposed to generate from the play call. Now, if you look at where Julius had the ball and the way Rudy set the screen, it would have been a really tough pass because of where the ball ended up being passed in. To get the ball to Mike Conley, Conley would have had to come up higher above the break, which is obviously not what they wanted. I think the Grizzlies would have gotten a better contest on that. And I don't know if it's just because both Conley and Gobert kind of saw that Ant was doing something, freelancing a little bit. But it wasn't going to turn out the way that it was supposed to turn out. But that doesn't mean it was a bad play call. They ended up not just executing it the way that they were supposed to. That's not Chris Finch's fault. I don't know what you want him to do on a baseline out of bounds play. That's a pretty weird spot to throw the ball in to try and get a game-winning three. So there's only so many baseline out of bounds play calls that are generated or that are designed to generate a 3-point look for you. I didn't have any problem with that. Ant freelancing, I don't know that anybody is going to have a huge problem with within the Wolves, mostly because he's your superstar and he wants the big moment, and he generally is good in the big moment. I thought it was a weird read. I don't understand why he immediately was like, okay, it pushed him out further. There's no way this play is going to work. I mean, it does, like I said, it does make the angle a little bit tougher. Randall's probably got to take a hard dribble or two toward his, to his left to get the ball to Conley, but that's still feasible. And I think it still could have happened. And it's just a weird thing for Ant to decide in that moment, hey, I got to do something different. I don't think it was that obvious that he should have tried to do something different. It almost felt predetermined to me. I don't think there was enough that was off about the play to, in the moment, be like, split-second decision, I got to go get this ball. It felt like he decided before the play, yeah, I want this shot. I don't know that that's true. And even if it is, I'm not saying he's like a bad teammate or anything like that. That's just what it looks like. And, if he'd been hot all game, it's maybe a little bit understandable. But for him to be an 0 from 3 and have 15 points on 13 shots and 6 turnovers in this game, for him to be just decide I want the ball in this play and completely go rogue, it's a bit dicey. Again, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, because if the Grizzlies hadn't switched it, like if Morant tries to chase Ant around the ball screen or around the handoff, then Ant probably gets a pretty clean look. But the Grizzlies clearly decided they were going to switch anything on the perimeter, and having Brandon Clark on Julius Randle made a lot of sense in case the Wolves were to call the play for Randle. And I saw people on Twitter say, well, you just let Randle go to work. Okay, well, that wouldn't have been a good play call either, because that's not a play call. That's just ISO ball with your second best player, down 2, that inevitably ends up being a game-tying 2 attempt instead of a 3-point. That wouldn't have made sense either. But the Grizzlies knew that if there was any sort of handoff action with Randle, they could switch Clark onto Ant. And at that, there wasn't enough time left for Ant to do anything but shoot a 3 if all that were to happen. And Clark was going to get a good contest with his length, athleticism, and defensive ability. So I didn't mind the play call. I did mind Ant's decision-making, and I question when he truly made that decision. I want to talk about some of the stuff that got us to that point in the game, because the Wolves did a lot of things really good. And then we'll close by talking individual studs and duds. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by Ultimate College Basketball HC. I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I'm really excited about, Ultimate College Basketball HC. If you've ever dreamed about being a college basketball head coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In Ultimate College Basketball HC, you control every detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, and managing scholarships. It's all in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to draw up offensive plays and set your strategy. The way you play won't just affect the current season either. It will shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer for Locked On NBA listeners. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCBB, all caps, inside the game store to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download Ultimate College Basketball HC, just visit ultimate-cbb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Basketball HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Today's episode is also brought to us by our title sponsors at Game Time. I love going to live events, all of the above: sports, music, theater, comedy. My wife and I will go to, like I said, all of the above. Sporting events are, of course, my favorite. We go to tons of different sporting events, not just basketball, but really anything. We're also big concert fans. We'll go to Broadway shows wherever, if we're traveling, we'll go to a Broadway show. We'll go to the traveling shows where we live. We'll go see stand-up comedy shows. And you could get tickets to all those events and more on Game Time. And now they've made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can find, like I said, anything, concerts, games, etc. on the Game Time app. You can find amazing deals and even see the view from your seat before you're buying. The Super Deal is also particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On NBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. So before we got to the final 5 minutes with the Wolves up 6, and then they ended up losing the game. What happened in this one? Well, I thought the Wolves actually played really well overall. This was another one of those where I don't understand the dramatics on social media after the game. Like, the Grizzlies are a really good team getting Ja Morant back. This was a fine performance for Minnesota. I didn't really have any issue with it. The biggest problem was there are two things. One, Anthony Edwards' relative disinterest in playing well in this game. Like, he got off to a tough start. Other than his awesome and one, and then he had a nice dunk a couple possessions later in the first quarter. That was kind of it for big Ant moments. He was very quiet otherwise, which is a problem. He can't just be quiet, right? He can miss shots, but he only ended up shooting the ball 13 times. Like I said, Desmond Bane didn't score until the third quarter in this game. He ended up with 21. I don't think. I'm pretty confident about that. He finished with 21 points at 14 shots, got up a bunch of shots late. Ant only shot 13 times in 39 minutes in this game and had 6 turnovers. As good as he's been recently, and as much as I praised him, even going back to that loss, when he had 53 against the Pistons, I thought he played well. He was going on having 4 straight really strong games, and this was just a complete stinker for him. And it's tough because everybody else played well. I mean, the Wolves got 18-8-8 from Julius Randle. They got 21-6 from Jaden McDaniels. Like, you don't get very many 20-plus Jaden games. You got to win those. Rudy had 12 points on perfect shooting from the field. Donte had 27, 10, and 7. Naz had 17 and 6 off the bench. Like the only other guy that struggled was Nickeil Alexander-Walker was 1 of 7 shooting from 3. That was it. Otherwise, everybody else played great. Now, the other problem is one that is really obvious and undoubtedly, this isn't in itself expert analysis for you. Memphis had 21 offensive rebounds in this game, which is just nuts. 21 offensive rebounds for the Memphis Grizzlies. You know how many more shots they attempted than the Wolves? 25. Memphis attempted 25 more shots than Minnesota. And the Wolves still got up 1 more 3-point attempt than Memphis did. And somehow the Wolves still won the points in the paint battle. Memphis, they do shoot some mid-range shots like that. That clearly is part of this here. But the Wolves won points in the paint by 4, and they won the 3-point takes and makes by 1 each. But Memphis attempted 25 more shots in this game, which is crazy. And they had 21 offensive rebounds. Minnesota had 7 offensive rebounds, which isn't a bad number for them. But it's bad when you give up 21. Like, Memphis only missed, 60 shots in this game, and 21 of them were offensive rebounds. So, more than a third of their misses ended up being offensive rebounds. It's completely inexcusable. And Rudy on the night only had 4 rebounds total in this game. Rudy had 4 rebounds in the entire game. Credit to the Wolves guards for getting, Donte led the team in rebounding with 10, but this was Zach Edey. I thought Santi Aldama, he only had 1 board, but he was really active for stretches in this game. Jared Jackson actually only had 8 boards himself, but the Wolves also, by the way, shot almost 57% for the field. So they actually, this was an offensive explosion. This was not an overtime game. We're talking about 127, 125 for a final score. So there weren't a lot of missed shots, especially from the Wolves side, but there's just another reason why they shouldn't have lost. The Wolves shot 57% from the field and over 40% for 3. Memphis was 44% from the field and 39% for 3. Each team shot the same number of free throws. This all comes down to the 21 offensive rebounds for Memphis. Basically, anytime they missed so many shots, but they got a ton of rebounds. The Wolves also turned it over 18 times. Memphis only turned it over 13 times. Actually, the Wolves turned over 19 times in this game and gave up 27 points off those turnovers, allowing Memphis to score in the open floor. Memphis was a +3 in fast break points too. So it comes back to 2 issues that we've talked about for the Wolves since last year. And I know they were good last year. I know they were a 56-win team last year. but issues that kept coming up last year too, the turnover issues. And while defensive rebound rate was much better last year, and it's actually not been terrible overall this year, I've talked about this so many times before. Certain opponents kill the Wolves on the offensive glass. And there's some nights where the Wolves just don't try. And this was a combination of I should say don't try. I don't mean that overall. I thought the Wolves played actually with really good energy in this game. Overall. What I meant to say was they don't make a concerted effort to lock down the defensive glass, which is obviously a huge problem. This should go without saying, but I've said this many times before. I'll say it again. The only way that an opponent's offensive possession ends is with a turnover that you force, a missed shot, or a turnover. It's the only way you're getting the ball back. Or sorry, a missed shot / defensive rebound. So the only way you're ending a possession is by getting a steal / forcing a turnover, them missing a shot and you rebounding it, or them making a shot. So defensive rebounding is defense. And that's the only thing that kept them from being like beyond historically elite last year, even though, the defensive rebound rate ended up being solid. It was easily top 10. They still had lapses. And this year, the lapses are even more frequent. And certainly not having Karl-Anthony Towns hurts. But so often this year, we could point to the guards not pulling their weight. It's harder to do that in this game when you have Donte getting 10 rebounds. I mean, Jaden getting 6 rebounds. Ant got 5 rebounds in this game. Rudy only had 4. I mean, Conley had 0, but he only played 15 minutes. This was a failure as a team to just be active in those intermediate spaces off of opponent misses. And that led to a ton of additional shots generated by Memphis. Again, 25 more field goal attempts in this game. The 25 more field goal attempts and the 6 less turnovers are what led to Memphis. And of course, the 25 more field goal attempts happened because they had 21 offensive rebounds. That is what happened here to the Wolves in this game. That's why this game was even close toward the end. You shoot 57% from the field and make one more 3 and shoot the same number of free throws as your opponent. You shouldn't lose. You just shouldn't lose. All right, let's close the show by talking individual studs and duds. We'll do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our new friends at OpenPhone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone. And before you know it, you're juggling customer calls day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where OpenPhone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. If you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off 6 months. OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA. If you have existing numbers with other services, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. All right, let's talk studs and duds. And this is a pretty clear one for this game. Donte DiVincenzo was awesome. I mentioned the one bad sequence he had in the fourth quarter, the ill-advised 3, and then the and 1 on the other end immediately following. But he had 27, 10, and 7. Andy shot 9 of 14 for the field. So 27 points on 14 shots. Was 3 of 3 on 2-point shots, 6 of 11 on threes. Got to the line for 3 free throws, made them all. Had 7 assists and only 3 turnovers, 2 steals, played 36 minutes in this game, second to only Ant. Was an awesome Donte performance. Was active at the end. Like I was just talking about how the Wolves didn't get on the defensive glass. Now he had 9 defensive rebounds of his 10 rebounds. He had, out-rebounded everyone else on the Wolves team. And actually, he out-rebounded everybody on the Grizzlies too. He had the most rebounds of any individual player in this game. Donte DiVincenzo did. On that last Wolves possession, or the last couple minutes of the game, he forced that jump ball against Jaren Jackson. And he tied up the rebound that led to, thankfully, instead of a jump ball, was out of bounds off Memphis because whoever it was standing out of bounds. That was another hustle play by Donte DiVincenzo. That's 2 plays in the final minute or so that were driven by Donte DiVincenzo's hustle. getting to the basketball and giving the Wolves other chances at possessions. That's all Donte DiVincenzo. He was awesome in this game. I thought he was clearly the best player on the floor. Jaden McDaniels, credit where credit is due, man. Jaden was great in this game. I've called him out a lot because I think he's a major weak link in this offense. I know he's a major weak link in this offense. Teams allow him to get open shots. And as did the Grizzlies, especially early in this game. Ja was on him for a while, like just let, whatever happens, was kind of their strategy with Jaden McDaniels. Well, he made them pay. 21 points on 9 of 12, 3 of 4 on 3-point shots. He was aggressive putting the basketball on the floor too. So he was 6 of 8 on twos. 6 rebounds too for Jaden, which is almost as big. Now, they ended up being out rebounded by a ton, as we just talked about. But like in a game where so many guys, like there were a lot of rebounds that weren't gotten, Jaden was active at least. He also had 3 steals. We talked about the pickpocket on Bain at the timeline that led to the Wolves building a 4-point lead late with a couple of minutes to play. That was big. He had 3 steals in this game, in a game where the Wolves only had 7 as a team. He had almost half of them. He also had 2 blocks and only 1 turnover. This was one of the better Jaden McDaniels games we've seen in a while. Again, 21 and 6 plus 3 steals and 2 blocks, 3 made threes on 4 tries. Big game for Jaden McDaniels. I'm going to go with Naz Reid for my third stud. Naz was great. And I mentioned like first segment that I'd get back to this. I thought like Naz played 30 minutes. So this isn't one of those where you look up and you go, man, Naz should have been on the floor, a lot more. Cause I mean, he tied for 4th on the team in minutes played in this game. So like he was out there. I thought that pulling him for Gobert with 4 minutes to play, understandable, but I think there was an opportunity to go back to Naz. The last possession, I understand wanting Gobert's screening ability out there, but I would say that time in between when this was a tie game and the Wolves had some opportunities to pull ahead or to extend their lead, like Rudy misses those 2 free throws, and Rudy overall this year has been great, has been much improved, although recently he struggled a bit more. But like now, if Naz is on the floor, does Naz get to that offensive rebound that Rudy was fouled on? I think it was an offensive rebound. I don't know. Naz isn't a great offensive rebounder. But I would have considered having Naz on the floor down the stretch instead of Rudy. And I say that knowing that Naz played more than usual, and he was in the game until under the 4-minute mark in the 4th, which is later than usual for him. But he was great. 19 points on 7 of 10, 5 of 7 on 3, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block for Naz Reid, only 2 turnovers. And was good. I like really good Naz game. And I it's tough because if they're going to play small with DiVincenzo on the floor with Ant and occasionally with Ant and Mike Conley, that's going to limit opportunities for Naz to be on the floor, with Rudy Gobert. And this was a game where like Gobert played 29 minutes, Naz played 30, and Julius Randle played 33. A pretty even split among those 3 bigs for Chris Finch. And for the most part, I kind of think that's how he's got to play it. And then tailor it to the opponent. And in this game, it did call for more Naz. I mean, Zach Edey's good. He only played 20 minutes, though. Jaren Jackson is the tough cover. And I mean, none of those guys are going to really guard him in space. But I think Naz has the best fighting chance, to actually guard him instead of, that's not what Gobert would do, right? Gobert, it wouldn't be guarding him anyway. But I think this matchup, I think the way it was handled overall made sense, except for the final maybe 3 minutes. But Naz was great. And I look forward to seeing how Chris Finch continues to kind of adjust the big man rotation. I didn't have any issues with the coaching in this game. Like I've called it out when I've seen it that I didn't really have any issues with how things were handled down the stretch, timeouts, etc. I thought it was fine. By the way, if you wanted Chris Finch to call time, like it's not like they gave up a 12-0 run. I mean, they were never up by more than 6. There was never a moment. I mean, Memphis had to call a timeout with under 2 to play because the Wolves had gone on a quick 4-0 run, but that never really happened the other way around. It was kind of a steady march to a tie, and the Wolves needed those timeouts because they got 2 cracks at it the final possession. So if you wanted Chris Finch to call a timeout sometime earlier in the 4th quarter, because that's the only thing we can complain about with coaching is, they should use their timeouts better. Then they would have had those timeouts for the 2 that they called in the final 16 seconds. I don't have any issues with how Chris Finch handled this other than, possibly changing up the big man rotation there in the final couple minutes of this game. But overall, good with it. Duds, I don't know. I don't really have any. Like, Nikhil was only 3 of 10 shooting, 1 of 7 from 3, but he had 6 assists. He was on the floor because they needed his flexibility in the backcourt defensively. I thought he was fine. Conley was quiet, but he only played 15 minutes. No real duds in this game. I should mention Julius Randle. I did mention he played well. If I had a fourth stud, it would be him. 18, 8, and 8. It was really nice. I thought he playmaked really well, especially early in this game for teammates, like first half. Again, 8 assists for Julius Randle. Only 1 of 5 on threes, but he was 6 of 8 on twos. And I thought he played well. This was a good Julius Randle game overall, in my opinion. So tough loss. Memphis is a good team. And this isn't one of those where you feel like the sky's falling afterwards. I don't think we should feel that way. The Wolves play tonight against Washington. I didn't have time to preview that matchup because there were a couple things this Memphis game I really wanted to get into. In short, the Wolves should win this game against Washington. And I don't really know. Like, Washington's now lost 5 in a row. Their last win was against the Bulls. They'd beaten the Hornets a couple games before that. And their win before that was against the Hornets. Their only good win this year really was against the Nuggets several weeks ago. This is obviously a game the Wolves should win. And I don't really know how else to say that. I'm going to pull up the FanDuel line here really quick to see what it is. But this is a very winnable game for Minnesota. It is in Washington. And that has been dicey for the Wolves at times in the past. Let's see. There's not a line yet. By the way, Washington plays Sunday. I'm recording this before Washington plays on Sunday. They're at home against the Thunder, and they're 16-point underdogs against OKC on Sunday. So they are playing a back-to-back too, for whatever that's worth. And who knows, young team, maybe it doesn't matter. But the Wolves will probably be favored by around double digits. On a back-to-back for Washington. Washington 16-point underdogs at home without the back-to-back against OKC. I'm guessing the line's going to be Wolves by 10 and a half, something like that. I think that's where we're going to be at for this, but we'll talk about it on Tuesday's show. We'll do the post-game pod. And of course, would be nice for the Wolves to bounce back, get back to above, 3 games above 500, which it's been hard to break through that ceiling, but hopefully that comes sooner rather than later here. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And, you can subscribe to the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. You'll get the newsletter Monday through Friday, all things Wolves, some additional Wolves links in addition to my content, and then you'll also get some national NBA content a couple days a week as well. So subscribe to the Locked On Wolves newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.